Depending on how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had one computer, so the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. And if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. Got to make sure that whatever you're doing is a great product or service. It has to be really great. And I go back to what I was saying earlier, where if you're a new company, unless it's like some new industry or new market that, if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to, the standard is lower for your product or service. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times, entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better. It's got to be a lot better.
We're unusually fearless and willing to go in the face of other people telling you something is crazy. And I know a lot of pretty crazy people. You still stand out. Where does that come from, or how do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear.
So speaking of important things,
like, people shouldn't think people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like, there'd have to be something mentally wrong if you didn't feel fear.
So you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do it anyway.
Yeah, actually, something that can be helpful is fatalism, to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. When starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%, and I just accepted that actually probably I would just lose everything. But that maybe would make some progress if we could just move the ball forward. Even if we died, maybe some other company could pick up the baton and keep moving it forward, so that would still do some good. Same with Tesla. I thought the odds of a car company succeeding were extremely low. I think just generally the path to leadership should not be through basically MBA business school situation. It's like, it should be kind of work your way up, do useful things, and there's a bit too much of somebody goes to a high-profile MBA school and then kind of parachutes in as the leader, but they don't actually know how things work. They could be good at, say, PowerPoint presentations or something like that, and they can present well, but they don't actually know how things work because they do not, they parachute in instead of like working their way up.
They never went through an apprenticeship, for lack of a better word.
They're kind of like just not aware of what's really needed for to make great products. So I don't want to trash MBAs too much here, and I actually do have a dual undergrad, Wharton undergrad, and physics at UPenn. So. So I have I have direct exposure to business school, and I went to do undergrad business school with physics, but and I was a teaching assistant for 2 semesters, and I graded MBAs and undergrads. But I think it's just a little bit too much. Like people look at MBA school as like I want to parachute into being the boss instead of earning it, and like I don't think that's good.
What do you look for in the people you hire, especially the engineers?
Really just look for evidence of exceptional ability. So it's not, or at least aspirationally, like sometimes these things get messed up in recruiting, or the recruiting filter ends up being wrong. Like I sometimes wonder with Tesla, if Nikola Tesla applied to Tesla, would we even give him an interview? It's not clear. You know, this guy came from like some weird college somewhere in Eastern Europe. He's got some odd mannerisms. Now, we don't know if we should give him an interview. Like, I worry that that's actually what we do instead of like, it should be like, man, Nikola Tesla, this kid's super smart. What does he want? We'll pay him anything. That should be that should be the reaction if Nikola Tesla applies, you know, to Tesla, ironically. But I can tell you the intent is we're looking for evidence of exceptional ability, and it really doesn't matter if you went to graduate high school or college or anything. We're just looking for evidence of exceptional ability, such that it would be a good predictor for doing exceptional things at SpaceX.
This was X.com was a precursor to PayPal, basically.
That's right, yeah.
Right? You merged with Confinity, and it became PayPal major success.
Yeah, so it worked out better than we expected. Confinity. So initially, Confinity and X.com started out from slightly different directions and then converged to the same point. With X, the thought was to create an integrated set of financial services, so you could go to one place and do all of your financial anything. And then as a feature, we had the ability to transfer money or securities or anything simply by entering a unique identifier. So like a email address or phone number or something like that. But when we would demo the system, the hard stuff, which was the integration of all the financial services, people would not be interested in, but they'd be really interested in being able to transfer money using an email address. Even though that was actually quite easy. And so we focused our energy on that. And although it's easy in principle, what gets really hard is adding security while still keeping it easy to use. So, because it's like the Willy Loman quote, like why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. So why do people rob PayPal? Same reason.
Right.
And so you can dial up the security to a really high level, but then you're going to make it very hard to use. And so that was one of the toughest things we wrestled with. You first have to say what is the goal, and once you have what is the goal, you can then measure the various designs against that goal. Otherwise, you're saying how are you evaluating why is one design better than another? What's your goal? It's got to be a goal. So the goal is get enough tonnage to Mars and enough people to make Mars self-sustaining as quickly as possible. So then you say, okay, let's back out the math on this. We're gonna need a lot of tonnage. Maybe, I don't know, 100,000 tons, maybe 1 million tons. So you can't be faffing around with these expendable rockets. They're a joke. The key to making things affordable is like designing. It's like design and technology improvements as well as scale. So if you think of like say phones, like the earliest cell phones. Like I don't know if you remember, I'm probably like dating myself here, but like the original Wall Street. Where the guy's like walking down the beach and he's got like the
it's like on a
giant phone.
He's carrying it on like a briefcase kind of thing. They're massive. Yeah.
Like massive phone.
Yeah.
And like all it could do is phone.
Yep.
And like had like 30 minutes of battery life and that kind of thing. Now, at that time, in the absence of technology improvements, like no amount of money, no amount of scale could have made that phone affordable. That'd be a lot of engineering iterations, a lot of design iterations. And we're probably, I don't know, on the 30th version of a cell phone. And with each successive design iteration, you can add more capability, you can integrate more things, you figure out better ways to produce it. So it actually gets better and cheaper, but it's like a natural progression of any new technology that it takes multiple versions and large volume in order to make it affordable. Other car companies just really want to outsource battery technology, not even making this battery module and cell, but they're obviously outsourcing the cells, but even outsourcing the modules and the packs. You know, and it's like they're really not thinking about fundamental chemistry improvements, and so I should say a bit about like electric vehicles or sustainable energy in general. You know, I said it was pretty, I think, obvious to not just to me, but to a lot of people, even go back 30 years or longer, that we must have a sustainable energy solution. In fact, it's tautological. If it's not sustainable, we must at some point find an alternative to it. And so, even if there were no environmental impact to the sort of a fossil fuel economy, then we would run out of them, and then we'd have economic collapse, and civilization would fall apart. So that was actually my initial motivation for electric vehicles. It's like, okay, we've got to have a solution that does not require mining hydrocarbons, that is sustainable in the long term. It was not actually initially from an environmental standpoint, because I did not realize the gravity of the environmental situation at that time. And I thought, actually, for sure, by now we'd have electric cars. Focused on, like I said, it is important to have the objective be right. That's why I was talking so much about the importance of making Mars building a self-sustaining city on Mars. If that's the objective, then obviously, just putting some satellites in orbit that's not important. You have to achieve full and rapid reusability. I emphasize full and rapid. Reusability is only relevant to the degree it's rapid and complete. And then you also have to do orbital refilling. This is essential as well. And then propellant production on Mars, also essential. So, with that as the goal, then that means that creates, I think, a good forcing function for radical innovation, because in the absence of radical innovation, we have no chance of meeting that goal. Whereas if our goal was simply, defeat Lockheed and Boeing or something like that, that we would probably achieve that goal.
You've already done it.
Well, that really wasn't even a thing, Yeah. I wish it was. They're not really trying to do reusability, which is bizarre, because they make planes that are reusable. So, I mean, if they talk to one of their customers, buys a Lockheed fighter jet or a Boeing aircraft, like, hey, we're going to sell you a 737 that can be used once, and it's not 737 Max. But that turns out that was a single-use airplane at times. But it really. It would be an absurd thing for them to sell a single-use aircraft, but they feel quite comfortable selling a single-use rocket. And anyway, but if our goal was simply we're going to be the leaders in launching the conventional satellites that exist, we would probably approach that on a sort of a logarithmic basis, where you'd get there and you'd sort of slowly make progress towards doing 10 launches a year, 12 launches a year, and while they do 6 or something like that. I don't know. But since the goal is, hey, we need to make life multiplanetary before it's too late, and time really matters, so it's like we're shooting for Mars, not just the moon. It's not let's shoot for the moon, shoot for Mars. And then these competitive things are kind of small things along the way. Unless somebody else is shooting for Mars, they will not be competitive with something as pedestrian as launching a few satellites into Earth orbit. I think that the way that we currently do education is wrong, and when you see something like the Khan Academy and so forth, I think that's probably going in the right direction. I mean, generally you want education to be like as close to a video game as possible, like a good video game. Like, you do not need to tell your kid to play video games. They will play video games on autopilot all day. So if you can make it interactive and engaging, then you can make education far more compelling and far easier to do. So I think that's how it should be, and it shouldn't be that you've got like these grades where people move in lockstep, and so everyone goes through, goes like normally, we'll go through English, math, science, and so forth from like 5th grade to 6th grade to 7th grade, like it's an assembly line. But people are not objects on an assembly line. That's a ridiculous notion. People learn and are interested in different things at different paces. So you really want to disconnect the whole grade level thing from the subjects. Allow people to progress at the fastest pace that they can or are interested in each subject. You want to make something beautiful. I mean, you want to trigger whatever fundamental aesthetic algorithms are like in your brain. You have, I think, some intrinsic elements that represent beauty, and that trigger the emotion of appreciation of beauty in your mind. And I think that these are actually relatively consistent among people. I mean, not completely. Some people not everyone likes the same thing, but there's a lot of commonality, but I think it is important to combine aesthetic design with functionality. Like the thing that's like, if you say like what was really hard about say the Model S or the Model X, was to combine aesthetics and utility. So to balance the two. You can make a car look very good by giving it sort of certain proportions, like making it sort of low and slim, but if you do that, the utility is significantly affected.
You keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month.
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. And try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree. But I don't want to diminish the. I mean, I think the profit motive is a good one if the rules of an industry are properly set up. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with profit. In fact, profit just means that people are paying you more for whatever you're doing than you're spending to create it. That's a good thing. and if that's not the case, then you'll be out of business, and rightfully so. You're not adding enough value. If you think about the future, you want a future that's better than the past. And so if we had something like the Hyperloop, I think that would be like cool. Like you'd look forward to the day that was working, And if something like that, even if it only was in one place, from LA to San Francisco or New York to DC or something like that, then it would be cool enough that it would be like a tourist attraction, it would be like a ride or something.
Yeah.
So even if some of the initial assumptions didn't work out and the economics didn't work out quite as one expected, it would be like cool enough to like, I want to journey that place just to ride on that thing. That would be pretty cool.
Wow.
And so that's, I think, how, if you come up with a new technology, it should feel like that. You should really, like, if you told it to an objective person, would they look forward to the day that thing became available? And be like, it'd be pretty exciting to do something like that. Or an aircraft. Like I thought it was really disappointing when the Concorde was taken out of commission and there was no supersonic transport available. And of course, the 787 has had some issues. But the thing is, the 787, even in the best case scenario, is only a slightly better version of the 777. And it's like, okay, not that exciting.
I don't think everyone needs to go, try to solve like some big world-changing problem. I mean, I think that, like, I really think like we should just think like, are we doing something that's useful to the world? Like, if you're doing something useful, that's great. I just think that like your sort of a usefulness optimization is like, that's like a really good thing. You know, if you've done something that's useful to your fellow human beings, you've done a really good thing, and people should feel proud of doing that. You know, it doesn't always have to be something that's going to change the world. I mean, sometimes the world should just keep going in a particular direction.
Help the world.
Yeah, it might be going in the right direction, and I mean, in a lot of ways, the world is, and we are in great shape. In that, if you look at, say, violent crimes, you know, per capita in the world, it's at an like all-time low. We're actually quite prosperous, and you know, compared to history, and you know, I think there's a lot of things to feel good about in terms of how the world is today. Access to information is incredible. I mean, you know, anyone with like a $100 device has access to basically all the world's information, which is an incredible thing. Yeah, so I honestly, I just think like the best thing for people to try to do is say like, hey, what is something that I can do that would really be useful to the world, and just do that, you know, and it's great. First of all, my goal is not disruption for the sake of disruption. I really think there's some important things we have to solve in order for the future to be good. I would say like my sort of algorithm or optimization is like, okay, what set of things do we need to do to ensure that increase the probability that the future is going to be good. And so if we have to solve sustainable energy, this is tautological. If we do not solve sustainable energy, then we have unsustainable energy. Then it's just a matter of time before civilization collapses. We must, but even if there was not an environmental issue, since the availability of oil is limited, this is not something we can sustain long term. My original interest in electric vehicles was actually not environmental. It was out of concern, just studying physics, and I'm like, wait a second, we need to transition to solar electric, or we're going to have a problem, and we run out of oil, civilization collapses. That's a problem. Now, of course, the environmental concerns have added to the urgency, because the more CO2 we put in the oceans and atmosphere, the more we increase the probability that something will go wrong. Like I said, like things are much more probability as opposed to certainty. But I think it's an unwise experiment to dramatically increase the CO2 in the atmosphere and oceans. Given that we know we need to transition anyway because we'll run out of oil. So why run that experiment? It's not. It doesn't make any sense. We know we have to transition to a sustainable energy economy. Then let's just get on with it. Let's just get on with it and not run the crazy experiment and see if what happens if the atmosphere has 2,000 ppm CO2. This is great. For evidence of exceptional ability. So it's not, or at least aspirationally, like sometimes these things get messed up in recruiting, or the recruiting filter ends up being wrong. Like I sometimes wonder with Tesla, if Nikola Tesla applied to Tesla, would we even give him an interview? It's not clear. This guy came from like some weird college somewhere in Eastern Europe. He's got some odd mannerisms. Now, we don't know if we should give him an interview. Like, I worry that that's actually what we do instead of like, it should be like, man, Nikola Tesla, this kid's super smart. What does he want? We'll pay him anything. That should be that should be the reaction if Nikola Tesla applies, to Tesla, ironically. But I can tell you the intent is we're looking for evidence of exceptional ability, and it really doesn't matter if you went to graduate high school or college or anything. We're just looking for evidence of exceptional ability, such that it would be a good predictor for doing exceptional things at SpaceX. I don't really like risk for risk's sake or anything. And I do think that a lot of things are very risky with a low chance of success. But if you want to try to come up with an innovative breakthrough, that's going to be how it is. Anything which is significantly innovative is going to come with a significant risk of failure. but if you've got to take big chances in order for the potential for a big positive outcome. If the outcome is exciting enough, then taking a big risk is worthwhile.
Yeah.
It's really how I approach it. But then once executing down a path, I actually do my absolute best to reduce risk, or to improve another way of saying it, to improve the probability of success. Because when you try to do something that is very, very risky, that you have to spend a lot of effort trying to reduce that risk as you embark down that path. I mean, when I started SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were very low. I thought we'd most likely fail, but I thought, well, we should give it a try nonetheless.
I think in general, if you want to recruit people that are really talented and driven, you have to state what's the mission, what's the problem we're trying to solve,
Yep.
and just be clearly willing to pour a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and have a convincing argument for why it matters.
Yep.
There's there's three major things for in terms of motivation. It's like, first of all, somebody's got to look forward to coming to work in the morning. Like, if they're are they enjoying the work itself intrinsically? That's very important. And the right work environment can really make a big difference there. I think ideally is that they also feel like that their rewards will receive fair financial compensation, like that the financial rewards are good and fair. And then third, for the best people in the world, they'll want to know, is what they're doing going to matter?
Yeah.
If they spend 10 years doing this, will it make a difference to the world, or will people notice? Will it matter?
The reason I got into space was to try to increase NASA's budget.
Well, God bless you then.
So I'll tell you, so the roundabout way I thought that might be accomplished was, I thought, well, if NASA's budget was larger, then we could do more in space exploration. And I thought, well, particularly if we could get the public excited about sending people to Mars. And I thought, well, if I could do a small greenhouse and send that to the surface of Mars with seeds in nutrient gel, and you hydrate the gel on landing, you have a little miniature greenhouse, and then you'd have, the public tends to get excited about precedents and superlatives. So it'd be like the sort of first life on Mars, the furthest life's ever traveled, and you get people sort of excited about, well, but maybe we should send people there, like the hell with plants, we should send people,
Right.
And then I thought, well, if that could get the public really excited about sending people to Mars, then that would translate into congressional support for a bigger NASA budget. That was the goal. And then I didn't have enough money to buy, and I thought that outcome would have a 100% chance of no commercial success. So the 100% chance of losing all the money. So compared to that, SpaceX, which I thought maybe had a 10% chance of success, that was an improvement.
I was always kind of like a crazy kid, I suppose. I was just very curious about the world and how do we come to be here? What's the meaning of life and all that? And I always had a really intense desire to understand things and learn. I had sort of an existential crisis, I guess, when I was 11 or 12 or something, trying to figure out what it's all about, and ultimately came to the conclusion that we don't really know the answer, but if we increase the scope and scale of civilization, then we have a much better chance of understanding the meaning of life and why we're here, or even what are the right questions to ask. So therefore, we should strive to expand the scope and scale of consciousness to better understand the questions to ask about the answer that is the universe.
It's hard to say, because things have worked out pretty well in the end. So how big of a mistake could it have been, as the question is really asking. I did lots of dumb things at my first company and at PayPal, I think sometimes, I don't know. There's so many. Like, I'm hard pressed to say this is the biggest one.
Give us one or two.
Okay.
Personal,
okay,
professional.
sure. So the biggest mistake in general that I've made, and I'm trying to correct for that, is to put too much of a weighting on somebody's talent and not enough on their personality. And I've made that mistake several times. In fact, then I would say, gee, I'm not going to make that mistake again, then I would make it again. And I think it actually matters whether somebody has a good heart. It really does. And I've made the mistake of thinking that sometimes it's just about the brain. The whole reason I started SpaceX was actually to try to increase NASA's budget. Or at least the way I got interested in space was I was trying to figure out why we had not gone to Mars. And I thought, well, maybe we need to reignite public excitement in Mars. So I initially started off with the idea of doing this philanthropic mission to send a small greenhouse to Mars, to get the public excited about sending life to Mars.
Yeah.
And if we got the public excited, then they would tell their representatives in Congress to increase NASA's budget. That was the goal. But I was no action. It was meant to be a philanthropic thing.
Yeah.
And then I tried to buy some ICBMs in Russia to do this, and ultimately came to the conclusion that that there's actually plenty of will to go beyond Earth, but there needs to be a way. Essentially, NASA needs to have more affordable rockets. That we need to increase the pace of innovation in space. And so, if we can give NASA another horse in the stable that is moving faster and costs less and is more innovative, then that would be a way to accelerate progress in space. So, I love NASA and always have and always will.
Underneath your beautiful beast.
Yeah, it's crazy. Can you believe this is even here?
I was here a month ago, literally standing right here. Well, not just over the fence.
Right.
And you had a tube and a pointy tube. And now you've got this. I mean, how do you do that? Is it just sheer will? Is it everyone that driven about the goal?
I think I've learned a lot of lessons about how to make things go fast. And then I've propagated those lessons to the SpaceX team. And there's just an incredibly talented, hardworking team at SpaceX. Yeah. In fact, at times I think maybe there's too many talented people at SpaceX. We have too many talented people that were cornering the market. But there's this very talented group that works super hard, and just taking the general approach of if a design is taking too long, the design is wrong, and therefore the design must be modified to accelerate progress. View on AI is essentially you can view the advancement of AI as solving things with increasing degrees of freedom. So the thing with the most degrees of freedom is reality. But AI has steadily advanced, solving things that have more and more degrees of freedom. So obviously something like checkers was very easy to solve. That we could solve with classical software, classical computing, not really all that challenging. And in fact, there is a complete solution for checkers, meaning it is literally impossible. Every version of checkers is known. And then there's chess, which also it had many more degrees of freedom than checkers, many orders of magnitude more than checkers, but still really, I would say, a low order of magnitude, low degree of freedom game. Then there's Go, which had many orders of magnitude more degrees of freedom than chess. So it's really just stepping through orders of magnitude of degrees of freedom. This is the way to, I think, view the advancement of intelligence. We were also going to enable people to watch like videos, like streaming, like through the browser. You'll be able to watch like Netflix or whatever, YouTube if the car is parked and connected to Wi-Fi. So if you're like say at a supercharger station and you want to watch something, you can watch it on the screen in the car. But the general principle is like, how do we, what can we do to make the car the most fun possible? And like, what do other cars just don't have, And so it seems like, well, if there's like you're just parked somewhere waiting for somebody to finish an appointment, or if you're on a road trip, it'd be pretty cool if you just like, go to the car screen and play some fun game. And we're just exploring like, how do we make it as fun as possible? You can already play all of the old Atari games, or almost all the old Atari games on the car. And we hooked it up so you can connect to Xbox or PS4 controller and like actually have some pretty good control feedback. Then we have like genius moves like the fart app. It's my finest work.
Okay.
It's like there's you can actually make, by the way, you can make the fart sound like it's coming from any seat.
That actually is the funniest Easter egg, that one. Yeah, you can position it. And then actually the names of the farts. There's the Falcon Heavy is one of them.
You tell a team, it's like everyone is a chief engineer. This is extremely important. And that everyone must understand how broadly speaking, all the systems in the vehicle work.
Right.
And so that so you don't have subsystem optimization, because this is naturally what happens. You can see the organizational errors the product errors reflect the organizational errors. So essentially you'll see that there's an interface at this, like if you got whatever departments you've got, that will be where your interfaces are.
Right.
And then instead of like getting rid of something or questioning the constraints, the one department will design to the constraints that the other department has given them without calling into question those constraints and saying those constraints are wrong. And you should actually take the approach that the constraints that you are given are guaranteed to be some degree wrong. Guaranteed to be some degree wrong. Because the counterpoint would be that they are perfect.
Right, which is never.
You say like, what's the probability that this is the platonic ideal of the perfect part?
Right.
Zero. Okay, basically.
Yeah.
So you could question your constraints. It does not matter if the person handing you those constraints won a Nobel Prize. Even Einstein was wrong some of the time.
Right.
So question your constraints. This is extremely important.
I probably wouldn't have started programming if it wasn't for video games, or wouldn't have been as interested in computers and technology if it wasn't for video games. So I think actually video games are a very powerful force for getting young kids interested in technology. It has way bigger knock-on effects than people may realize. And generally, like if we're interviewing somebody for a software engineering role at Tesla or SpaceX, many times they'll be like, how'd you start programming? It's like, oh, got into video games. Over and over again. And I think many of the best software engineers in the world are at or spent much of their career at video games houses. And especially if people had to try to create incredibly realistic graphics using very little compute power, that's a hard problem. And so a lot of people had to write really tight code and come up with really clever ideas to do that. If you look at someone like, say, John Carmack, who's an amazing software engineer, but is also actually a really good aerospace engineer. And it shows like, problem solving, I think, does transfer. Like you figure out software engineering problem solving and transfers to other things.
I think fully considered cost actually just means that if there are, you want to look at both the benefits and the costs actually. So if in sequestering carbon or removing it from the atmosphere or oceans has some perhaps some environmental impact, which might be small, but it's not negative. That certainly needs to be taken into account. And then by the same token, if what's done is in extracting carbon is a useful product from which you can generate revenue, then that should count too. Right. So I don't know, I'm just sort of saying for argument's sake, like let's say you could create, construction material, like,
Cement.
Cement.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we
Cement,
I'll talk about that
cement
later.
or some kind of useful rocks that are useful, or sand, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Something that's useful for construction. Then you could say, okay, well, this is what we could sell it for, and and then just fully consider pros and cons, and say, okay, this is what, if we need to pay to have it done in the future, which we probably will have to do, then what's the lowest net cost? I stopped using TikTok when I felt the AI probing my mind, and it made me uncomfortable. So I stopped using it. And in terms of anti-Semitic content, I mean, TikTok is rife with that. It has the most viral anti-Semitic content by far.
But do you think the Chinese government is using it to manipulate the minds of Americans?
No.
Is that something that you think we should worry about? I mean, you have different states that are trying to ban it.
I don't think this is some Chinese government plot. But it is, the TikTok algorithm is entirely AI powered. So it is really just trying to find the most viral thing possible. It's what is going to keep you glued to the screen.
Right.
That's it. Now, on sheer numbers, there are on the order of 2 billion Muslims in the world, and I think much smaller number of Jewish people. 20 million, something? Many orders of magnitude fewer. So if you just look at content production, just on sheer numbers basis, this is going to be overwhelmingly anti-Semitic.
Let me ask you a political question. And I've been trying to square this one in my head for a long time.
Yeah.
In the last 2 or 3 years, you have moved decidedly to the right, I think.
Have I?
Well, we can discuss this. I think that you have been espousing and promoting a number of Republican candidates and others. You've been very frustrated with the Biden administration over, I think, unions and feeling like they did not respect what you've created.
Well, I should make a point here. So nothing any of my companies have done has been to stifle competition. In fact, we've done the opposite. So at Tesla, we have open sourced our patents. Anyone can use our patents for free. How many companies do you know who've done that? Can you name one? I can't. At SpaceX, we don't use patents. So, I mean, so once in a while we'll file a patent just so some patent troll doesn't cause trouble. But we're not stopping any. We've done nothing anti-competitive. We've done nothing to stop our competitors.
I'm not suggesting you are at all.
No, I just want to clarify for the audience, because some companies have done anti-competitive things. I think the strange thing, or the unusual thing about SpaceX and Tesla is that we've done things that have helped our competition. So at Tesla, we have made our supercharger system open access. We've made our charger technology available for free to the other manufacturers.
The reason
no walled garden. We could have put a wall up, but instead we invited them in.
The reason I mention this, though, is because you've had this success in the physics world, you now have these very difficult decisions that have huge impacts on the world that are not physical decisions at all. They're decisions of the mind. They're decisions that you and others have to make, and there's a question whether you should be making these decisions at all. And I think about it in the context of Starlink